Hey guys, Dimension Master Studios here. How y'all doing? So, something interesting that I've noticed is that when it comes to the Ninjago fan base, over the past few years, the fan base has been giving a lot of criticism towards Jay. It's something that I've noticed a lot when it comes to the fan base, but it's something that honestly I've never really agreed with. Mainly because I feel like when it comes to Jay, he's honestly been handled really well when it comes to the franchise. But like I said, I've noticed that a lot of people have been giving criticisms towards Jay, especially when it comes to the way that Jay has been handled in the post Skybound era of the franchise. So in today's video, I wanted to take a look at the way that Jay's been handled over the past few years, take a look at some of the criticisms that people have given Jay, and offer up some defenses for this in order to explain why I feel like Jay is still being handled well when it comes to the show. So, let's get into this whole thing. So, when it comes to Jay, by far the biggest piece of criticism that he has been getting over the past few years is fans saying that when it comes to Jay, he has become more childish as the show has gone on. And this is a piece of criticism that honestly I don't agree with, mainly because I've never really understood it. I've seen multiple videos dedicated to Jay's character over the past few years, and I've seen people talking about Jay's character and the way that he's been handled, but again, I've never really understood this criticism of Jay becoming more childish as the show went on. Maybe I'm just missing something that all these other fans are seeing, but again, this is a piece of criticism for Jay that personally I've just never really understood. That being said, though, I did want to understand why people have this criticism towards Jay, so I decided to take a look at various things, and I feel like I've narrowed it down to three big reasons as to why people feel like Jay has become more childish as the show has gone on. So now I want to take a look at these reasons and share my thoughts on them and offer some defense for Jay. So, for the first big reason, one thing that I've seen a lot of people bring up is the idea of Jay getting less and less smart as the show has gone on. Again, this is something that I've seen a lot of people bring up, but it's something that honestly I don't really agree with, mainly because we've seen multiple moments in the post Skybound era of the franchise that showcase Jay's intelligence and just how smart he is. Like, for example, during the events of Season 9, Jay's the one who comes up with the idea to build the fake version of Firstborn so that way they can use it to scare all the hunters and the ninja would be able to escape. Plus, not to mention, Jay's the one who comes up with the actual design for the fake Firstborn, and he comes up with a lot of the specifications and mechanisms for the fake Firstborn so that way it will be able to work properly. And this ties into Jay being an inventor, which was a big part of his character in the earlier seasons of the show. Or during Prime Empire, during this season, Jay uses his knowledge of video games in order to help him and the other ninja make their way through many of the challenges that are present within the Prime Empire game. And later on during the season, we even see him and Nia using their dancing knowledge in order to help them get through some of the final challenges that are in the game. Or during Crystallized, we see Jay using his knowledge of model trains in order to save the ninja when the Spire Bomb's exploding inside the tunnel underneath Ninjago City. Again, we get multiple moments showcasing Jay's intelligence and just how smart he really is. So I really disagree with the idea that Jay has gotten less smart as the show has gone on. However, there's two moments in particular that I see a lot of people usually point to whenever they bring up the idea of Jay becoming less smart. So the first scene that we have happens during the very first episode of Sons of Garmadon, specifically during the scene when the ninja meet Hutchins for the first time and they learn about the Oni Masks. And during this scene, Jay ends up confusing the word Oni for only. And this is a moment that I've seen people point to when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming less smart. However, I don't entirely blame Jay for messing up here, and it's for a few reasons. For one, the ninja have never had to deal with anything related to the Oni up until the events of Season 8, so I don't really blame Jay for not being fully aware of the Oni and what they are. Secondly, at this current point, the ninja weren't really aware of the Oni masks or that there were multiple masks. They were only aware of the one that Cyrus Borg had, and that was it. And when it comes to Jay, he thought that there was only one Oni mask. Again, he didn't realize that there were multiple masks until Hutchins explained everything. So again, I don't really blame Jay for messing up here. But finally, and this is the biggest one, this is literally the only time this ever happens in the show. This is just one singular moment that we get during Season 8, and that's it. this kind of thing never happens again at any other point during the season or really during the show as a whole. And like I said earlier, we get multiple moments where we get a chance to see Jay's intelligence and just how smart he really is. So when it comes to this moment, again, personally, I don't really agree when it comes to the idea that this moment shows that Jay has become less smart as the show has gone on. But now there's the other moment that I want to bring up, and it's the stuff that we get with Jay and Murtessa during Season 13. So, for a bit of background when it comes to this, during the events of Season 13, Jay, Nia, and Lloyd ended up getting separated from the rest of the ninja, and they ended up in the Kingdom of the Munces, where they ended up meeting Murtessa, the Queen of the Munces, who almost instantly fell in love with Jay, and she wanted to make Jay her king. And she was very upfront and forward about this, and she was constantly flirting with Jay after she met him. And this results in Nia becoming very, very angry, especially since when it comes to Murtessa, she wasn't treating Nia well in general. And when it comes to Jay, he doesn't really have the best handling on the situation. And this is another moment that I've seen people point to when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming less smart as the show went on. And while I will admit, I feel like Jay definitely could have handled the situation better, I don't entirely blame Jay for not having the best handling of the situation, because think about it from Jay's perspective. As far as we know, when it comes to Nia, she is the first and maybe even the only person who's ever had romantic feelings for Jay, but when it comes to Murtessa, she also has romantic feelings for Jay. So when it comes to the idea of someone other than Nia loving him, this is something that Jay probably never even considered. But again, here we have Murtessa, who does in fact love Jay, and like I said earlier, she's being very upfront and forward about it, and she's flirting with Jay a lot, which is something that we've never really seen with Nia, or at the very least, not to the extent that we saw with Murtessa. So when it comes to Jay, he's essentially being placed in a situation that he's never been in before. So Jay wouldn't know how to react to this situation. So again, I don't really blame Jay for not having the best handling on the situation, because again, he's never been in this kind of situation before, so he wouldn't really know what to properly do about everything that's going on. Again, like I said, I will admit I feel like Jay could have had a better handling on the situation, but I don't entirely blame him for not handling the situation that well, because like I said, Jay's never been in this kind of scenario before, so he doesn't really know what to do. So just like when it came to Jay confusing Oni for only, again, I don't really agree with this moment being something that showcases Jay becoming less smart as the show has gone on. And overall, like I said, when it comes to Jay, I feel like he hasn't gotten less smart as the show has gone on, and I feel like we've seen multiple moments during the show that showcase Jay's intelligence and just how smart he really is. So moving on from this, now we have the second reason that a lot of people usually point to when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming more childish as the show went on, and it is the idea of Jay becoming more scared as the show went on. Now, this is something that I do actually agree with. I do agree with the idea that Jay has gotten more scared as the show went on. However, I don't view this as a bad thing when it comes to Jay. And I feel like the idea of Jay becoming more scared is something that does make a lot of sense, because when it comes to Jay becoming more scared, this actually came as a direct result of his story arc that he went through during the events of Skybound. So, for a quick recap, when it comes to Skybound, Jay's entire character arc during that season revolved around him learning to stop pretending to be someone who he wasn't. This is something that we saw Jay do all throughout the events of the season, with Jay constantly pretending to be someone who he wasn't. We saw this with Jay doing things like taking advice from Cliff Gordon's book, or him making a couple wishes to Nonicon in order to make it so he wasn't born in a junkyard, and so on and so forth. And as a result of Jay doing this, bad stuff happened to him all the time. Whether it was the ninja losing their trust and faith in Jay, or Jay feeling really guilty as a result of him doing stuff like this, again, there were always negative consequences as a result of Jay pretending to be someone who he wasn't. However, after Jay stopped doing this and he started to embrace who he really was, things for Jay were finally able to turn around and things for him got better. Nia finally confessed her feelings to Jay, and she admitted that she did like him and had romantic feelings for him. Jay was able to form the ninja replacements, and they were able to successfully make their way up to New Jinjago, and Jay was able to get the Jin Blade. The ninja were able to be freed from the Jin Blade, and they were able to launch a full assault on Yang's temple in order to stop the marriage between Nia and Nanakon. And when it comes to the idea of no longer pretending to be someone who you aren't, this is actually something that Jay brings up in a speech that he has towards the end of the season, with him talking to the rest of the ninja, as well as Flintlock and Dogshank, where during this, Jay talks about how when it comes to Nanakon, he tried to manipulate them into becoming people who they weren't. And that gave Nanakon power, and it made him stronger in comparison to all of them. However, if they all embrace who they really are, and they stop listening to what Nanakon has to say, and they stop doing what Nanakon is trying to do to them, then they will actually be able to overpower Nanakon and eventually defeat him. And this is something that we do actually see during the season. As a result of the characters embracing who they really are, Nanakon is ultimately defeated because Flintlock is able to get the perfect shot in order to hit Nanakon with the Tiger Widow Venom. And so again, when it comes to Jay's overall story arc during the events of the season, it all revolves around the idea of Jay's no longer pretending to be someone who he isn't. And I feel like this is why we see Jay as being more scared after the events of the season. So when it comes to Jay, him being scared was a big part of his character in the earlier seasons of the show. However, I feel like Skybound puts a new context onto the idea of Jay acting scared. Remember, Jay's entire story arc during Skybound revolved around him learning that he didn't have to pretend to be someone who he wasn't in order to impress people. And I feel like when it comes to Jay acting scared but still acting brave in the earlier seasons, that bravery was essentially an act, and it was a way for Jay to impress the other members of the ninja team. However, after Jay went through everything that he did during Skybound, Jay realized that he doesn't have to pretend to be someone that he's not in order to impress the other ninja, and they're still going to like him no matter what happens. And so I feel like with Jay acting more scared post Skybound, it's meant to show that when it comes to Jay, he's embracing who he really is, and he's fine with being more scared and emotional in front of the other members of the ninja team, because that's who he really is. And when it comes to Jay, he knows that the other ninja aren't going to judge him or dislike him for doing this, because if Jay is his true self, then the other ninja will like him. And I also feel like when it comes to Jay no longer pretending to be someone who he isn't, I feel like this is also why we see things like Jay being really interested in video games, or Jay taking an interest in model trains, or Jay dancing. Again, it's all meant to connect back into that idea of Jay embracing who he really is and him being himself in front of the other ninja and them liking him no matter what happens, which is something that I do think is interesting. Plus, also when it comes to the idea of Jay being more scared, like I pointed out when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming less smart, we do get multiple moments during the shows showcasing Jay's bravery and how even though he is being more scared, he can still be brave when the time comes for it. Like for example, during Season 7, while most of the ninja go off to the Mega Monster amusement park in order to fight back against the Vermilion Warriors, Jay goes to his parents' junkyard all on his own in order to help protect his parents from the Vermilion Warriors who are taking metal from it. Or during the events of Prime Empire, when Jay and the rest of the ninja continuously lose their lives over and over again during the season, Jay still does whatever he can in order to make his way through the game in order to get out of it, so that way he and the other ninja can rescue everyone trapped inside the game. Or during the events of Seabound, we see that Jay is willing to sacrifice himself in order to restart the engine, the Hydra Bounty, so that way the team can get to Nia, and so that way everyone can be saved. Or later on during the season, we see that Jay is willing to fight against Calamar all on his own after he seemingly destroyed Nia. So again, while we do see Jay as being scared during the events of the Wild Brain era of the show, again, personally, I don't really have an issue with that because I feel like it makes sense that Jay is acting like this because it connects into the idea of Jay embracing who he really is. But at the same time, we do get multiple moments showcasing Jay's bravery and how he can still be brave and step up when the time comes for it. Finally, though, there is one last reason that I see a lot of people usually point to when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming more childish as the show went on, and it is the idea that as the show went on, Jay did not emotionally mature or go through any emotional growth as a result of everything that he went through during Skybound. And yet again, this is something that I disagree with. For one, I feel like Jay embracing who he really is, with him taking more of an interest in certain things, as well as him being scared, is meant to reflect that emotional maturity that he went through during the events of Skybound, showcasing that when it comes to Season 6, the events that season did have an effect on Jay. But also, I feel like we've gotten multiple moments during the events of the show that do showcase Jay's emotional maturity and how he's grown as the show has gone on. Like, for example, during the events of Season 7, we see that Nia is still struggling with her being the Ninja of Water and her trying to let go of the identity of Samurai X, and we see that when it comes to Jay, he's willing to do whatever he can to be there for Nia, and he's willing to help her get through this no matter what happens. Or during the events of Prime Empire, where during this season, we see a lot of similarities between Season 12 and Season 6, mainly with the idea of the ninja slowly getting picked off one by one until only Jay and Nia remain. However, I feel like when it comes to both these seasons being really similar to each other, I feel like this is actually a good thing, because I feel like this actually showcases how much Jay has grown, because Jay is being placed into the exact same situation that he was placed in back during the events of Skybound. And back during the events of Skybound, Jay didn't really have the best handling on the situation, given the fact that he was making poor decisions a lot, and like I said, he was constantly trying to pretend to be someone who he wasn't, and that never really worked out well for him. However, when it comes to Season 6, we see that Jay has a much better handling on the situation, and we see that he has a more hopeful and optimistic view on things, because he's already went through this kind of scenario in the past, and things did eventually work out well for him. So I feel like it's safe to say that when it comes to Prime Empire, with Jay acting the way he does during the season, with him being more hopeful and optimistic, it's meant to show that when it comes to Jay, he feels a lot more hopeful about the situation that he's in, and he's doing his best to try and get out of the situation. He's been in it once before, so he might be able to get out of it again. And again, when it comes to Prime Empire, I feel like it being similar to Skybound is a good thing, because it's meant to showcase Jay's emotional growth and how he's gotten more emotionally mature as the show went on. And then finally there's Seabound, and I honestly feel like this season and Prime Empire both do a really great job at showcasing Jay's emotional development and how he's grown as the show has gone on. Because during this season, like I said earlier, we see Jay being willing to sacrifice himself in order to restart the engine in the Hydra bounty, and like I said, he's willing to fight against Calamar all on his own after he seemingly destroys Nia. Although speaking of Nia, all throughout the events of the season, we see that Nia is clearly struggling with her emotions given everything that's going on with her powers, and Nia isn't really too sure what to do about everything. However, we see that when it comes to Jay, he is willing to do whatever he can in order to help out Nia. And even if he doesn't always know what to do, he's still willing to be there for her and help her out no matter what happens. Again, even if he doesn't know what to do, he's still willing to be there for her, which I think is honestly something really, really great. And I honestly feel like when it comes to Seabound, it does a genuinely fantastic job at showcasing Jay's emotional growth and how he's developed as the show has gone on. Although speaking of Seabound, there's one scene in particular from this season that I do want to talk about, and that is the scene that just about everyone brings up when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming more childish as the show went on, with that obviously being the scene where Jay pees his pants.
I'm definitely gonna need to wash my boxer shorts again.
Like I said, just about everyone points to this scene when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming more childish. However, just like the idea of Jay becoming more childish as the show went on, this is something that, once again, I don't really understand, and it's for a few reasons. For one, this is the only time this ever happens during the show. It's not like this was a running gag that we saw during the Wildbrain era of the show, or even during Seabound. Again, this was the one and only time this ever happened in the entirety of the show, and that was it. It never happened again, and it was never referenced again by any of the characters in the show. It was just one singular moment, and that was it. Secondly, this was also one pretty small moment that was just meant for a quick joke, and it's something that wasn't supposed to be taken seriously, yet I see so many Ninjago fans taking this scene seriously, even though, again, it isn't. And finally, the last, and in my opinion, by far the biggest thing, I genuinely feel like the rest of Seabound completely overshadows this moment, because when it comes to the way that Jay is handled during this season, like I said, it is absolutely fantastic, and I feel like Seabound does a genuinely really great job at showcasing Jay's character and how much he's grown over the years, with us getting a chance to see stuff like Jay's intelligence, bravery, emotional maturity, and more. When it comes to Seabound, and again, also Prime Empire, I feel like both these seasons do a genuinely really great job at showcasing Jay's development and just how much he's grown over the years. And so again, I honestly really don't get why this is the scene that a lot of people focus on when it comes to Jay during Seabound, when, like I said, I honestly feel like the remainder of the stuff that we get with Jay during Seabound completely overshadows this moment, with the rest of the season showing just how amazing Jay really is and how much he's grown over the years. And so again, when it comes to the idea that Jay hasn't emotionally matured post Skybound, or the idea that Jay didn't emotionally mature after the events of Skybound, again, personally, this is something that I don't really agree with, and if anything, I feel like when it comes to Jay, following the events of Skybound, Jay has only emotionally matured more and more as the show went on, rather than not emotionally maturing as the show went on. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. Overall, when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming more childish as the show went on, like I said, personally, I don't really agree with that criticism when it comes to Jay. Personally, I feel like Jay has honestly been handled really well when it comes to the show post-Skybound, and if anything, I feel like the post-Skybound era of the show has actually showcased some of Jay's best moments that we've gotten when it comes to the show, with there being multiple seasons, again, especially Prime Empire and Seabound, that do showcase Jay's growth and just how much he's improved as the show has gone on. And it's something that I do think is honestly really impressive and great to see. However, with that being said, there is one thing that I will admit, and it's that I feel like when it comes to the idea of Jay becoming more childish, this is something that we saw during the island. This is literally the only Ninjago installment where I will agree with the criticism of Jay becoming more childish, because I do feel like Jay's character overall wasn't really handled the best during the island. Because I do feel like when it comes to the three big criticisms that I talked about, Jay becoming less smart, Jay becoming more scared, and Jay being less emotionally mature, I do feel like all three of those things were present during the island. But again, when it comes to Jay acting more childish during the island, to me, this is the exception and not the rule. Again, this is the only time where I do agree with the criticism of Jay becoming more childish as the show went on. But as for every other Ninjago season, I do not agree with that criticism, because I feel like either A, Jay was handled well, or B, if I feel like Jay was handled poorly, like during Crystallized or Dragon's Rising for example, that usually came from something else altogether, like Jay getting nothing to do in those seasons for example. But again, overall, when it comes to Jay, I honestly feel like he's been handled really, really well when it comes to the show. And again, personally, I don't really agree with the criticism that Jay's gotten more childish as the show went on. Personally, I think Jay's honestly been handled really well, and if anything, I feel like the post-Skybound era of the franchise did a really great job at improving on Jay and turning him from an already good character to a legitimately great one. And so that's pretty much all I got for you guys. So tell me down below what do you guys think. Tell me what are your guys' thoughts on the way that Jay's been handled post-Skybound, and what are your guys' thoughts on the criticism? Again, tell me down below, and I hope you guys enjoy. Later, guys, this is Dimension Master Studios, signing off.